Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. I'm very excited today in our special season about workplace mental health to invite Tony Nneke to the podcast. He is an account director for a business called Oracle. He's also super passionate about diversity and inclusion, and is also passionate about this mental health topic. So welcome to the show, Tony.
Thank you very much for having me. Excited to share my story. So thank you, Petra.
I'm excited too. So before we dive in, we got a couple just questions that we ask everybody. So I'm going to dive in for you. What has been, if you can remember, I'm putting you on the spot, the best piece of advice that you have gotten about your work or career?
Networking and putting yourself out there. Basically, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Network expands your knowledge, your contacts, and you see who's doing good in your field. You also learn what not to do as well. So that has been the most important thing. With a network, you don't kind of feel on your own in your challenges. You've always got someone who's hopefully been through it and can guide you in a better manner. So yeah, networking and put yourself out there.
I love those because I would 100% agree with that. It's who you know and how you nurture those relationships, right? Because you never know down the line how that can affect you in some way.
Absolutely, yeah.
And putting yourself out there is like feel the fear and do it anywhere kind of vibe, right?
That's it. That's the outside of the comfort zone bit, which I still, have to have challenges with. But that definitely is the one. Yeah.
Keep putting yourself out there. Okay, lovely. And then second question, what have you most needed to unlearn to get to where you are in the workplace? Was there anything you had to unlearn, conditioning, ideas that actually held you back in some way?
Yeah, my false beliefs that I don't belong in a corporate environment. So that's unlearning every day. That somehow, just maybe don't speak the corporate talk, don't fit the profile, just breaking through those old mental barriers before I even get to an interview or in front of customers, in front of colleagues. It's those barriers that's been put on me. I put on myself.
Well, probably a bit of both.
Yes.
They're in our culture and society and our upbringing and whatever, and then it becomes ourselves, doesn't it? This idea of like that's who we are or where we fit.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one. I didn't go to school as a kid because my parents traveled all around and thought the school of life was much more important than actual education.
That sounds pretty cool.
Well, it does to the outsider. And actually now I can be like that networking and putting yourself out there. I probably had a head start because we were always engaged with other people in some way. But the belief system of you're not smart enough to be here. Right? Like I remember I'd been going on stages and doing keynotes and all this stuff for a while. And then they asked me to come to a very prestigious university. Yeah. Holy shit, a university. They are the smartest people, professors who are in that audience. And I was thinking, I was just going, I don't deserve to be here. Like, why am I speking to the education sector? Like, what do I know? Even though I had a master's degree at this stage.
Wow.
so people were like, what are you talking about? Like, you've been doing this. Like, I made up for it as an adult, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny that belief system can just be so heavy or intrinsic inside of us.
It's the most powerful thing, good or bad. If you believe in yourself in a positive way, then you excel, and equally it's destructive if it's unfortunately negative for the person. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to dive into all of this stuff. I'm so excited about this conversation. So let's just jump into the topic about mental health at work. So this idea around, the depression is now the leading cause of disability worldwide. And there's a lot, especially in the corporate sector, this feeling that you've got to show no weakness. Stress is just normal. You should just deal with it, all this sort of thing. What do you see within the corporate sector when it comes to this topic of mental health?
Yeah, great question. I think that there is a taboo still there. I think there is a lot more work though being done positively. So a lot more focus around, mental health day and mental health week, where employees are doing blogs and employees are speaking about their own personal challenges. But I think in general, it's still not often spoken about. If it's stress and challenges, it's to do with the specific work. So if it's in sales, it's, the stress around obviously hitting target, pressures from senior managers, pressures from customers. You want them to meet your time scale to land the deal. So you have those kind of challenges, which if you're not doing well, can be seen as stress. But then you have outside of your work bubble that can affect the employer, and I think that's not often spoken about in terms of how that can affect somebody working to the best of their abilities. So I still think that a lot more needs to be done around people feeling comfortable in a safe environment to talk about I'm struggling today actually, so I might not be as productive as I need to be. I still think that generally can't be said in the workplace, and certainly other team members may not understand and be like, oh, why has this person got days off, or why they're off sick? So I think it's still quite secretive. A one-to-one discussion with the manager is fantastic if you've got that support, but outside of that, to the wider team, it's still kind of unknown. That's maybe a colleague who's going through some challenges outside of work that's affecting their productivity.
But isn't it interesting how you could go easily if you had, I've got diabetes, or I've got I broke my leg in a skiing accident, or, I've got a physical health condition, or my mom's got cancer, or, some of these are still, it's easier for somebody to go, oh God, of course, like you've got to recover your physical health and before you come back. Like, why do you think there's such a difference between the mental health aspect? Like, hey, I've got depression, or I've got seasonal affective disorder, and I just can't get out of bed this morning. Why do you think it's so different?
I think because it's very personable to the individual. So I think it's, and then it's like, how do you box that? For example, I'm into sports. So I watch a lot of Sky Sports News, probably too much and very religiously, because it's repetitive. If you watch Sky Sports News, it's the same news you hear at 10 o'clock that you hear at 1 p.m. or what have you. But what you'll find there is there's a lot of, footballers have been recently speaking about the mental health that they've had in terms of, always trying to win and then, not making the team, etc. And even though that's a unique challenge for that sports person or that footballer or that athlete, it's still quantifiable in the box. Oh yeah, sports. Okay, you're right. Okay. Oh, so they didn't win, so they weren't good enough. And I think even then people are sort of trying to understand that. But I think where it's very vast, where it could be like having an argument with a partner, which then leads to triggers where somebody thinks, okay, well, if they're not being a good partner or a good husband or a good wife, then they're failing at that, then therefore it has a knock-on effect on maybe on their children or their relationships, their friendships. How do you bring that into a discussion, and how do people understand that? Because I think you get the general message back in terms of, everyone's down in life, just kind of deal with it and move on. Whereas if it's something to do with sports, it's okay, well, I haven't been that sport athlete, so yeah, I can understand. And I just think people find it easier to understand that than a very personable challenge, an issue that might be relating to the past that still affects them today.
And that takes a lot of self-awareness anyway, for a person to understand those layers of triggers and behavior. Whereas many times, if people don't have that awareness, they might not even know what's going on themselves to effectively. And then there's a layer of not being able to ask for help for it, So there's that self-awareness piece, which I know we're going to go into a little bit when we get into your story. But I'm curious, like in the corporate sector, if someone's physically unwell, so just that comparison again, how long, like what's the cutoff point, do you think, for people's empathy? If I'm off for 2 days, all right, fair enough. If I'm off for a week, oh, you're starting to let the team down. If I'm off for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something more long-term, maybe there's more kind of whispering behind closed doors, or a bit like, oh God, they're not tough enough, they can't hack it, especially in sales. Like I see of all the industries, because we work like across loads of industries, sales team, like I'll be in an organization where they've got the well-being piece and whatever, and the sales guys are not allowed to go to it. They're not allowed to go. So it's like the culture within the culture, right? Where they're like, you got to hustle. Like you chose to be in sales. So you've got more than anyone have got to hustle. Anyway, I threw out 10 things there for you. But one is, what's our time limit on empathy when it comes to physical health even? And the other one is like, do you see nuances in the sales team, I guess, where it's even more, toughen up, show no weakness?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it all depends on the environment, so the company, the culture, and the manager. So, across my sort of professional career, yeah, I've been involved where, you overhear, someone's been off for 2-3 days, and then there's whispering. If it tends to be longer, if I've witnessed that, then, and particularly if the team don't know, because again, as I said, there's a lot of, and rightly so, one-to-one conversations, so that the manager will discretion will, that's a conversation between the person and that employee that's off. So if the remainder of the team are unaware, and it's now 2 weeks, 3 weeks, then clearly there's going to be, more murmurings. What I find, or I found disappointing in the past, and this is not me saying it's in my current role, just throughout my career, is when it's negative murmurings, which is disappointing, because obviously we don't know what anybody's going through, but it just it's a reminder that when we're challenged, I think negativity seems to rear its ugly head, in terms of, oh, we all like days off, but we don't. Why have I got to work when I'm feeling sick? And they may relate that to, a cold or a flu or what have you, or something more severe, but they've come in and another colleague is off for 2-3 days. They're not really sure why. It then sends the message that maybe that colleague is a little bit weak, particularly if they do it on what would be seen as a regular occurrence. So I've witnessed those types of conversations, and I've been guilty myself of thinking, oh, why is this person off? So I think that culture in itself is still negative and toxic, and makes the person who is struggling, probably aware of the murmurings, even more guilty that they're feeling this way, and guilty that they can't, as you say, toughen up and just come in and do the job.
Yeah, it just makes it more difficult. And really, what I've seen that can help if the culture does have psychological safety is having more transparency about what's going on. Yeah. So the really forward-thinking organization, someone can say, hey, I was off for 3 days because I had a really severe depression episode. Thanks, guys, for covering for me. And those people also aren't scared of going, hey, is everything all right? In a similar way as when somebody comes back from a physical illness, people will be like, hey, what was the hospital like? Is everything, are you back to normal? Do you need help? Right? So just having that transparency in some way. Any ideas on what makes a good leader? So you talked about that person having the conversations with the individual, or maybe supporting the team when it comes to the kind of, I say mental health like really broadly, as kind of the health of our mind, or like you said, our ability to function. What if we've had that relationship argument, or our kid is struggling at school, or a whole host, our parents sick, or a whole host of normal stresses of life? What do you think a leader can bring to the table? What's their responsibility?
Empathy is a big one, because that's your, the first person that you're confiding in generally. Certainly for me in the past, that's what it has been. And it's scary, right? Because you're not calling up saying you have a sore throat, or bereavement or anything like that, which are all serious in their own light. You're talking about some mental issues that you're struggling with. It's not allowing you to focus, and then now you're going to speak to a manager who's already got expectations for you to deliver. And I know for me, when I had that conversation, I was already thinking that I'm not delivering. I was already in a negative place and very paranoid about how I was being perceived, which actually was part of the illness. So you're scared of being judged. You're automatically thinking, oh, is this going to hinder my progress? So when the manager was able to show empathy, understanding, and even, to their credit, give their own examples of what they've been through to show that they sort of understand, that helped. That took a lot of pressure, a lot of that paranoia sort of went away. And then it felt a little bit like a mutual agreement, right? They weren't going to tell the team, why I was off. It was an agreement, but equally, they were there to support if I wanted to tell the team, as such. But I didn't choose that route. But that felt that, okay, this manager has my back and has my support, and I then worried less about my role within the organization moving forward. So that helps. So I think empathy is a good point.
So empathy, but also what I'm hearing is autonomy and choice. So saying, hey, I can tell the team something, and support you in that more open route, or I'll respect your privacy and it's that transparency, but giving you the person who might be struggling the choice about what the next steps are.
Yes, and that's exactly what. It really felt like that. That they were, if I wanted to do that, they'll support me. So it felt like a conversation. Supposed to, okay, Tony, this is what we'll do. You take 5 days off and then come back and everything's okay. It felt more as a two-way conversation.
A bit of both.
That's important. That's important.
So now everyone's super curious. They're like, we're getting some hints now that Tony's been in the situation where his own mental health struggled. It took a hit in some way. So I'd love to just dive into that middle bit of our conversation, which is, why is this mental health topic important to you? Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So in respect to work, I have been signed off before. Had struggles where I just wasn't functioning at all. So had challenges at home with relationship with my wife. But deeper than that, it was just issues that were coming to a head. So it was a case of wasn't being productive. I was at work, but wasn't really there. Wasn't involved in, I was present in team meetings and team conversations and the office banter, but wasn't really there. And I started to feel it and know it myself. And as I said, the paranoia then started to really rear its ugly head, because I started to think, can people really see through me? Can they see through this facade that I'm giving off, that everything's okay and smiley Tony? And it really made me withdraw a lot. So I started to be late for work, late for team meetings, didn't want to go to team conferences where then you had to network, with other colleagues and talk about how work's going. Did not want to do that, dreaded it. So I had to really tell my manager, look, this is what's going on, before they started to suspect, why is Tony late, continuously late, and challenges like that. So that was hard. I felt embarrassed, to be honest, that I'd let it overspill into my work. And at that point, I thought that's it. They'll say, okay, that makes sense. We'll let you go. And which was not the case, but it just the speaking out. And don't get me wrong, there were a lot of employee assistant programs where you can call and speak to somebody more on that professional level.
Did you ever utilize those?
I did. There's only so much you can do with that, I think. And again, it's down to trust, because even though it is private, my paranoia was really strong, and I sort of felt like this will go back to my manager, though I know full well it doesn't, but I just wasn't maybe in that right headspace to really utilize it. But they go through like a protocol where they ask you a series of questions on a scale of 1 to 4, where do you see yourself, and then 1 to 5, etc., etc. And I scored quite high. So they said, okay, well, at that point you need to actually go and seek some medical advice and so on and so forth, which I then did. So I went through the counselling sessions and prescribed some antidepressants, etc. as well. I'm curious about that word embarrassed that you used, where you and I really relate to the energy that it takes to look happy Tony. For me, it was happy Petra. Like sometimes the times when I was actually the worst, crumbling behind the scenes, I was like, makeup on, put on my best clothes and look like I'm completely present. Like I'd work harder on the outside so that people wouldn't see the inside. What were you? We're on the same page there. Which is why often people can't tell that people are struggling. Absolutely.
They're all like, look for the signs and symptoms. Over time, you started being late, and that, but I imagine there was like a good, months even of lead up to that. What was the embarrassed? Just tell me a little bit more about that.
For me, I'm very have a lot of pride. So to even say I'm struggling, it didn't compute with me. Like the words were coming out my mouth, but I was in denial as I was saying it. So that was embarrassing to even say I need help. Like I struggle to ask colleagues for help now to do my role. Not where can I find the the quotes for this product and where can I find more information, I like to try and source it myself. And if I really can't find it and I've exhausted every avenue that I know, then I'll ask. So then to then say to you know, my manager and to share with colleagues, no,
it's just not part of that culture, that conditioning. I think when we were at the beginning, it's like you're a man as well, and I think there's an extra pressure on men to just kind of be the fix-it guy and like know stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's and it's the image I'd created for myself. You know, like I like the idea of people liking me. I like the idea of being seen as positive or being seen as remotely smart. And so to say that, okay, I'm struggling is one thing, because there's different things that cause a struggle. But then to say, well, actually, there's issues at home, and my depression is a cause of that. There's issues from my past, as in when I was a teenager, when you could argue really began, which I still haven't resolved, which is rearing its ugly head into me being a father, to me being a husband, to me being good friends with my friends. So it's destroying my relationships, and then to admit that into the workplace was like, what are you doing? You know, that was the whole shame. And then it was a catalyst with just, you know, things changing in the workplace. So whether there's roles moving to different departments and fear about, okay, is this redundancy? Is this sacking? So all of these things were just happening, which were, in my opinion, at the time, beyond my control. It just, it was that or have a breakdown, you know. So I needed to then speak, and even that was, I said that. So that was the whole embarrassing process, was admitting to, because before admitting it to work, I had to admit it at home. I had to have conversations with my children, my wife, my friends. Exactly. So I had to do all of that. So it was a whole narrative of you're failing. It's basically how I just processed it. You
to admit it, yeah.
Yeah, that admitting it was, but didn't feel like strength at all. It was failure. It was admitting that you're a failure, and now people are going to help you to not be a failure. Which that in itself, as I said, felt embarrassing. So that was the whole process in my head.
Yeah. And how long do you remember, like how long the lead up was to you actually? I mean, you kind of said since you were a teenager, probably a whole lifetime of lead up. But when things were like, you mentioned depression, like when things were really not quite right and were affecting you, you know, in the build up to having to say this.
I'd say maybe 2 to 3 month period. And you know, and those 2 to 3 months was just fighting it, denial, fighting it, making it work, and no. You know, every day was, I've got this. You know, today's the day where, like that, it's gonna change, and you know, and
hoping.
Yeah, absolutely, and doing it my way, which my way was just what I've always done. So it might be the, you know, the sick day or not being productive, but nobody knows because you've worked out a system where you can show that you're working, but on your own you're going through turmoil. So that was a whole 2 month, 3 month period, and then it was just like, nah, that just but basically just had to do it.
This is just a really powerful highlight to leaders or managers that might be listening, of what's maybe going on behind the scenes that is affecting productivity if you don't create psychological safety where it's safe to maybe talk about some of these things beforehand. So I'm curious, just on the home front and the personal front, whatever bits you're obviously comfortable telling us about. You mentioned depression. Like, what else was? Have you battled depression for much of your life, or was it like? I'd say so.
Without
maybe realizing that that's what it was, but
that would be it. I mean, I left home quite young. I left home 16, 17. And that was just fundamental disagreements with my dad. I say it like that, not to blame him in that. I say dad because my mum left home prior, when I was really, I say young, like 10-ish, and she had challenges with mental health, which are vivid, but not more than vivid. There's strong images in my mind. The challenges she went through. You know, she had severe mental health issues where she had to be, you know, sectioned. And I remember that vividly. And then I remember having a lot of anger. I remember blaming my dad for that, etc. And then when she finally got better but left blame my dad for that. Our relationship never really recovered from that. I grew up having a chip on my shoulder and just wanting to prove him wrong. So, if he said I was hanging around with the wrong friends, I'd hang around with them more. If he thought I was doing well in school, I'd rebel. So it was just anything that I felt I could do to somehow show my disapproval to him, but it was harming me, really. So that was the challenge. So I left home to try and figure life out for myself because I thought I don't need him. And that was really probably the beginning then of it. So you could argue the wheels were already in motion, but in terms of a small sense of awareness, it would be when I was now living on my own, because I had a lot of time to think, I had a lot of reflection, a lot of flashbacks, and they were all negative images, negative memories of stuff that I've done, which I think embarrassed myself, which made me feel worse, made me feel like I wasn't lovable, tried to toughen up, change my persona, all of those things. And that's, as I said, I'm 41 now, so 17 years, I'd say. So probably, so from 17, started to really realize, you could say for 24 years, on and off, working on a system which covers my cracks and my layers without really maybe dealing with it all. And then obviously, yeah, but that is probably it, surviving. Yeah, and when you are achieving, there's a sense that well, you're okay. You've done it, and stuff. So that's
you
kind
get
of
to ignore it for longer. The pain maybe, and the hurt and the shame. You use the word shame about, your part in things, and you just get to avoid in order to survive. So many of us do it, right?
Yeah.
And so you're talking about pretty striking things. Your mom's getting sectioned. She then leaves really, really early on. And of course the sort of feelings that are left between the relationship with you and your dad. But were there, like, did you know at the time that it was a mental health thing, or that your mom was, did you understand the context around mental illness because of your mom? Or was it all like a bit stigmatized of like, oh, she's crazy, or she's this, or we don't understand what's going on?
I didn't understand. I was aware, but didn't understand. And what's interesting is my dad is a psychiatrist by trade and hypnotherapist, etc. So I didn't really appreciate what he does. I'll be honest. And he writes a lot of books and studies the field. So I wouldn't really understand what he was doing.
That's kind of fascinating, though. I think everyone's thinking right now, oh, yeah. Fascinating.
Well, that to me compelled my embarrassment, to be honest, because I was like, my dad is a psychiatrist and helps people
with this sort of thing.
Yeah, and then there's me struggling. So that was shame before even admitting it to anybody else. Like I can't tell my dad this, So that compelled it even worse, to be fair. But but in terms of my mum, no, not the first time, because she would say things like, she's seeing people and just stuff that I didn't understand, but knew something wasn't right, because you just get a sense that your mum's not smiling, she's not happy.
It's a bit scary as a kid, though, when you have that uncertainty, and your parents are meant to be your rock and like know the answers, and now they're like, a bit fractured.
Yeah, 100%. That is probably my biggest fear to this day is losing my mind, because at that point my mum didn't know who she was really, but she's living, which is so you see a woman walking around and what have you, but she's not there, and to know that can happen to somebody who hasn't done any harm to nobody. As far as I'm concerned, she's God to me in a female form, and then she's just broken. And then, as you said, your parents are your rocks, and then that marriage is broken. It was like, whoa. So I felt alone from then, and then decided I don't trust nobody, really, and that's probably been the biggest thing. So my distrust came from there. I started to have, thinking things that just thinking things differently and seeing things differently and then believing it myself. I didn't want to share my thoughts and ideas with nobody. So it's all in my head and I have to sort it out myself. But my fear is, you know, to be old and lose my mind and not know who I am. And that definitely came from seeing my mum just change and break down. So yeah.
Yeah, and also I'm being reminded of our first sort of question around, you know, what are the things that you've learned and what did you have to unlearn? That barrier of, you know, I don't belong in a corporate environment. But I'm curious where you do feel you belong with that kind of history.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. Even now, I'll probably say to you, I'd say I don't know, but then I'll say what's interesting is for me when I'm going to say maybe 11, 12.
Yeah.
That's probably the age it feels to me. But I remember saying to myself, because I used to talk to myself a lot when I was younger in the space. I grew up with my sister, but we didn't talk about these things. She sort of decided this is not happening and shut it down and didn't speak about it.
Survived in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was more, what are you guys doing? And whatever. But I remember saying to myself, when I'm older, I'm going to get married, have children, and my marriage will last forever. Right. And I know why I said that, because I saw my mum and dad break up and I was like, nah, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to do it right. You know, I'm going to make it right. I'm going to undo this mistake that's happened, but in my life. Mm-hmm. So again, fast forward to the present time, or obviously the past as we're speaking about it, and my marriage is, you know, arguments and losing my cool and my kids looking at me differently, my sons, and seeing the shock in their face and the disappointment, it brought it all back. And it's like, I again compelled the idea of I'm a failure. Like, hang on a minute,
I promised myself.
Yes.
I said I was going to do it different. Correct. And then we're in the cycle.
Correct. And to me, that it just came from nowhere, you know, because to find out when you're young that your parents have been separated for eons, but living together to in the same house to raise you and your sister, you know, you find that out when they're, going over custody and stuff like that. And you feel, okay. And then, as I said, make the promise, make the vows, and then
repeat the mistakes,
basically, you know, and not knowing repeating the mistake, and then it just hits home because it comes out through the voice of your wife, the voice of your children.
Yeah, that's the scariest thing, isn't it? The repeat. Also, like just cycles of abuse. And I'm not saying anything about abuse is a strong word. I'm relating it to my experience being raised in a cult and control and black and white thinking and this is the way it is sort of thing. And I'm like, I'm going to be liberal. My kids are going to have the beauty of choice, critical thinking, education, all the things. Like we want to veer to the opposite, right? Of what the flaws of our parents. And then I became alcohol addicted, angry, judgy, black and white. You're a reflection of me, kids. You know, so you better help keep up the mask, right? So that we are perceived as okay, and they don't give a shit. They're like, what? I'm trying to be myself, right? And it's so confronting because it's suddenly like a mirror to like your own. Like, at what point do we take responsibility for ourselves and stop sort of using the cause of our past or our parents or whatever, and have to start the journey of self-development, right? So you've had a couple wake-up calls. Your parent, your wife, it's very striking. Your sons, the look in their eye changes, the disappointment, and you're like, oh, right? You now said you had this choice at work to break down completely and spiral out yourself in a way, or to ask for help and say something. So you've had what we call those rock bottom moments of like, holy shit, I've got to do something. What are some of the things that you've put in place? Because it's people notice you're being super open on a public platform. Like, what's the journey that's gotten you now to this point where you're open about the story?
Talking, basically, just the desire to want to change has to be stronger than the fear, because the fear is always going to be there. Basically, like that's for me anyway, was a hard reality because again, thoughts, beliefs, but I kind of figured, once you change or you're doing right or you're confident, somehow that doesn't mean that you're faithful. Like it just, so again, when fear came from, no, can't have that, can't have any ounce of negativity. And it's actually just like, no, it's going to happen. You're going to have down days, but just speak out. So the more you speak on things, or again, hopefully, and I appreciate it's not the same for everybody, but the more you speak out, others may share their stories, and it's similar, or it's understanding, or certainly makes you feel better, so you don't feel like you are absolutely like on your own, like you are the only person who's witnessed something
Feels
bad
that
happen
way.
to their parents.
Yeah.
Once you realize that, it doesn't ease the pain per se, but it certainly take away, okay, I'm not crazy. How do I deal with this emotion then? How do I deal with it? So it certainly helps me talk. There's less embarrassment when I talk about my past because of speaking, because again, the first thing I don't want to do is, oh gosh, what are people going to think about my upbringing, or are people going to, slander my parents, or am I going to embarrass my family? Do they want to hear me? All of these things. And then there's even, if you speak to my sister, she'll recollect things differently, and stuff like that. So it's like, how much of it is fantasy? All of these nonsensical thoughts in my head. So it's like the more I speak out and other people speak, there's a sense of, I don't know if I'm using the right word, but like normality to it, to an extent. Yeah. So it allows me to be more relaxed about speaking. I'm going to speak in my truth, based on my perception, which I appreciate. That's the key, perception to it all. So
your
that
story.
helps.
It's your personal story and narrative that you made sense of. Yeah.
So, but definitely talking, because talking, you just don't know where it leads. Like I'm talking to you today, and that's through, a colleague of yours, hearing some of the work I've done within my current role now. So, and that's also through speaking on whether that's diversity or on change. So talking opens up doors and helps shut some doors as well. So I'll just say to anyone, speak, and there's bravery in that, even if you're vulnerable.
Ooh, got chills when he says that. Because at the beginning you were like, failure. I didn't feel strong, and sometimes the bravest things, we don't feel brave when we're doing it. We feel like we're desperate and we're crumbling and all this sort of thing. But that was just a powerful statement around bravery and talking. And you said you did some counseling. I know that your personal development hat is securely on, just like practicing sort of reading and I guess practicing these things in your relationships as well. Like, how do we get vulnerable there? I'm in a relationship for the last 18 months, and my God, they can be, they bring up everything, right? So it's the place to like see everything, but also have a witness to it. So we have this opportunity to heal in a way through the tough, I don't know, what have you learned there?
Still healing. That's what
a lifelong journey.
Because the truth comes out in many ways.
I know, right?
You know where I'm going with that. It doesn't come out. Yeah, it does not come out the way you want to hear it, like in lights. No.
Like a Buddha Instagrammable saying. No.
Yeah, it certainly it doesn't. And
confronting.
And it does tell me where I am though, because if I react to it negatively, then I'm in a negative place already, because I feel like when I'm at my best self, and when I'm at my best self, it's not even critique. If someone says something good or bad about me, I take it for what it is. If they're trying to help me, I see where they're coming from. If I don't think it has any value, I hopefully don't try to be arrogant enough to be like, what are you talking about? Like, okay, cool. I'm already aware of that myself, so I'm addressing that. So but thank you for something you noticed maybe a month ago, but it's the first time we've caught up or whatever. But if I'm in a negative place, or like a cycle, I call it grey clouds. So my grey clouds are starting to form again, and I haven't noticed it. Then that's a reminder, because when I'm then told the truth, I now see it as critique straight away. Like, default right there. How could you say this about me? Da, 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 da. What do you
Defensive.
mean? I get defensive. Absolutely.
Mm.
Which is a sign that there's something brewing that I
That
haven't
it's,
addressed.
that there might be some truth in it
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
there's a reaction.
Yeah. And but unfortunately for me, it's I will come to that reflective state after the fact. So unfortunately, once I'm in that, I have to go through the storm, and then like, oh right, calm down. So that's why I mean it's always learning. So I give you an example. So during lockdown, it's going to feel like I'm digressing, but I
go for it.
stopped smoking.
Good. Oh wow, respect.
Well, yeah, past tense, but I started smoking for 5 months. So really in a place of, I just decided to do it. It's something I wanted to do for a long time because smoking has been my
your nemesis.
Yeah. You know, it's where I get to speak to the unseen in my mind. So I'll go for a cigarette and I'll talk about my issues, my challenges, my stresses, reflect, but to nobody really, and talking to myself or whoever might hear it, and then come back, feel like I'm, you know, fine.
It like gives you that break in a way to then bring your cortisol down, reflect, circle back in. Yeah,
that's it. So placebo effect with nicotine, and but you know, I thought I do want to stop this because at the same time I pride myself to try to be healthy, want to eat healthy, exercise, train, bit sporty, blah blah blah. So I thought that's a contradiction, and I want to, you know, so I thought, let me stop. But you know, equally, by doing that, it made me more aware of my triggers, because I said when I got triggered, I'm smoking. Even if it's at work, I'll have a 5-10 minute break, and then there might be 15-minute break. If there's at home, I'll be outside, etc. And you know, spray so that my younger daughter doesn't smell it, because she doesn't know I smoke. The boys have kind of growing up on me hiding smoking, but they smell it, they know. But as I said, dealing with the triggers, and some days it was a lot easier. Like, oh, okay, right, this trigger, I would literally visualize myself. Wow, this would have caused me to smoke, and then because I'm aware of it, like, okay, I'm not going to smoke, and lasted well. But unfortunately, the last couple of weeks, got stressed, broke away from my own routine, which is interesting. I now know the importance of routine, because when routine is easy, I didn't see it as a routine and kind of just took it for granted. Slipped away from that, slipped, and
which many people can relate to at the moment.
And then went back to smoking cigarettes, and not beating myself up about it too much, but just the way you slipped. Because for me, like the best analogy I heard, and this was on a TV program, I believe, I can't remember now, I think it was EastEnders of all programs, Phil Mitchell, the character Phil Mitchell, being an alcoholic. And I remember him saying, well, I think it was him, he said he stopped drinking. Some said, well, have a drink? He goes, no, I'm an alcoholic for life. So I know that if I have one, I'm a
that's it.
Yeah, that's it. So basically, I'm not drinking because I can't really say that. I'm not drinking because I don't want to, but I just know that I want to stop. I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And
that's almost with me with the cigarettes. I now know that, to be honest, like the triggers, the fears, the raw emotions, the anxieties, the pain did not go away over those 5 months. In some parts, they spiked because the clocks wasn't there, and that urge was heightened. And I sort of managed it, but it was a struggle with other things going on. So realizing you really have to stick to a routine and trust yourself. And I saw it away from that, as I said. That's the learning.
Yeah. No, super good points here, just around talking, routines, but also this awareness or observing your trigger points and how they affect you and where they connect from your past. And it sounds like you've learned some of those skills through your counseling, but also the process of talking and hearing other people's stories, and realizing that we all have a story. And if we connect the dots, it affects who we are in relationship, as a parent, as an employee, that side of things. So I just want to circle back to the workplace and think about what were the best things and maybe the worst things that teammates or managers did for you when you were going through this stuff, without naming names? So you said the collaboration piece was probably a good thing. What were some of maybe the good and the less good things that people did to support or not support you when you were going through these things at work?
Good question. The good is easy to remember because I had more good than bad. I don't think the bad was
That's a relief.
intentional. So I'm fortunate in that way. But I had support in terms of people reaching out, when to talk, see how I'm doing, particularly when I came back. So because there's confined in a few colleagues. So when I came back, I guess there was more like if I like seeing a long lost brother, that you'd argued with, there was more sort of not that the hugs before went genuine, but it was more genuine. How you doing, etc. Because I think maybe at that point I've shown them that I'm my vulnerable side or my human side, as opposed to just focusing on work, constantly talking about work, trying to land a deal, how we speak to the customers, jokes about work. This is now speaking on the personal level and starting to open up a little bit more. So I think that strengthened some of my friendships now, as opposed to work colleagues or people I got on with at work, but then outside of work didn't really meet with them or didn't really phone them. Connect. Now that changed. That dynamic changed, which we so that was good. And equally with my managers at the time, more trust. To be honest, because I said I had an issue with trusting people. There was more trust. Maybe they'd earned it because they showed
up for you.
Yeah, basically, absolutely. So there was trust there. So that helped. And then the bad it wasn't really bad because, as I said, I didn't, even though I'm still talking. Showing it, yeah. Correct. So I didn't really speak to many. So therefore, others would just treat me the same. So I would actually say the bad on my part, or what I feel I could do better, was I didn't tell enough people, because I'm coming back with still an expectation, which is weird. So I know that I've only spoken to my manager, my mentor, a few colleagues, but somehow I'm expecting everyone else to treat me differently. But they don't know. I haven't told them that. So that's should they? Yeah. And I for some silly reason I didn't really consider that fact. So everything else carried on as normal. I just looked at my work differently and didn't take on the stress of expectation at work. Didn't bring it back home. Made it a sincere point to say, this is me at work doing my best. This doesn't define me as a person or doesn't define my character. I'll do my best. And if it's, unfortunately not good enough for the customer or for my manager, then it's for me to learn and get better at my job. But it doesn't mean that Tony Nneke as a person is a bad person, which somehow I was merging the two.
That's a powerful separation, because it affects our self-worth, and we then realize, well, we're gonna have good days, we're gonna have bad days, but you're still Tony and on the path that you're on.
Yeah,
absolutely. So finally, first of all, how open are you now at work? So we're having a conversation, a sort of separate platform. It's Petra's Open Mental Health Day and all the rest of it. But how open are you now in your current role?
It's a good question. I'm open if I'm asked, if that makes sense. So so where I work now, we have a well-being. And I was recently interviewed about the work I do for my Cultural Harmony Network within Oracle, and spoke also about mental health as well and the importance of that, and shared a little insight, not to the detail I am today, on my own challenges. So I'd speak on it if asked, but I don't openly speak to colleagues on it, because again, to the culture, it's not necessarily, we don't really speak on these things. So I kind of, I guess it's a stigma I still hold within myself, actually. I kind of speak if it's brought up, because to bring it up, my perception is it dampens the moods, but which is silly. And I say the word silly, I'm being harsh on myself here, and I have a habit of doing that, because actually everybody generally knows someone else who's struggled. So actually it's an eye opener, but I just sort of kind of gauge when to bring it up. So if I'm asked by wellbeing, Tony, would love to get your views on it, I'll speak. And then whoever hears that, if they don't want to speak to me and approach me, then I'd happily open, but I guess I don't advertently talk on it.
And I think that's a really good point, because I guess the point isn't to make everybody always talking about everything from their triggers in their past. It's about finding your own balance and boundaries so that you can be healthy at work, right? So you now know who to go to or where to go when you're struggling. And it might be someone inside work, but it might be people outside of work. But it's you finding your own kind of happy place and balance, right? And then for some people, being more proactive about that might be useful. Moving, if we just do some future gazing for a little second before we close, do you think the world of work is changing? Would you like to see, like, what's your blue sky thinking about the workplace when it comes to the topic of mental health? What do you wish would be there?
It's a very good question. I do think it's changing. I think the whole. I think people are more open to talk, but more importantly, more open to listen. I think that's big. Certainly in my company that I work for now, people are open to listen. There are the forums. You could argue generally there could be more done internally to raise awareness of the forums, as opposed to, you know, I'd love to see what the percentages of people who know about, you know, like employee assistance programs, either before they announce have issues, against being told
when they're in crisis. Then it's like, oh, here's this number, but do you know in the lead up?
Right. So, because I think everyone goes through mental health every day, and sometimes it's the little things that cause the triggers that lead to it's not always a big catalyst event of some sort. It's the little things that trigger something in the past, or trigger something now, or trigger something about the person that then spirals and gets worse. So even someone just being aware of these numbers to call, I think is important on a general level. But going back to your point, I always thought, you know, I'm seeing some organizations, for example, with to respect different religious groups within organizations, will have maybe some prayer rooms or safe space. I think there should also be like a safe space for someone to talk within the workplace. I appreciate dynamics are changing now because not many people are in offices, let's say, because working from home. But I think almost like an on-site mental health advocate or counselor, or, you know, where they can quickly just have a conversation privately with somebody
like
in the
check-in point, like a coach or
So I think it would be good, or even like forums at the workplace as well, where, you know, you've got diversity groups, one that I chair, but and again another one where people can just come around and talk about challenges that they've had this week or today. I think would be good as well in the workplace, so that it just creates a culture of an open space. So check-in point, a drop-in, it could be chaired by that you know, counselor or mental health advocate or what have you, and they're just sharing, feel good about themselves, connect with other people within the organization, where there's connections which they wouldn't have thought of before, because they just see this person as, oh, you work in that department, I work in that department, but we're going through the same challenges outside of work, which are both affecting what we do at work. So I think more of that would be good across all organizations. And I think equally when organizations have like internal conferences, something to do around mental health, I think would be important as well, whether it's to volunteer and support charities, or whether it's to announce the employee assistance programs, just something, just again, to remind people where all eyes are going to be that this is actually important to us, that we're going to mention it, you know, on this particular conference, even if it's a 10-minute segment, so that somebody personally could quickly jot it down, tell nobody if they don't want to, but then they can make that call and have that conversation. I think would help a lot of people as well.
Amazing. So just the awareness, the visibility. Tony, we're at our time. Thank you so much for your personal story more than anything. It's really useful to understand the experience of somebody who is struggling and is coming into the workplace and how that might show up, and the responsibility on the individual to talk about it, but equally on the manager or the boss to create spaces where it is possible. And I love your thoughts just around having that mental health check-in point, that coach, that visibility, and hopefully that conversation is changing. And as you say, more and more companies are becoming open. But thank you so much for your story and for being with us on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.